Donald Trump outlines his vision for the United States in a key speech to Congress.
And we are just getting started.
Also tonight, Volodymyr Zelensky vows to make things right with Donald Trump. How will a minerals agreement help mend the relationship? A rare and hazardous event. More than 4 million Australians on alert for life-threatening Cyclone Alfred. And the dreamy melodies with influences from Ecuador to Switzerland. We profile musical duo Hermanos Gutierrez. I'm Janice Petersen. This is SBS World News. Good evening. US President Donald Trump has addressed a joint session of Congress, laying out his vision for his second term and his rationale behind the sweeping tariffs against the world. He's also announced that both Ukraine and Russia were ready for peace, claiming the war would end soon. His speech was filled with campaign rhetoric and greeted on both sides with partisan predictability.
Taking his time to revel in his return to the hallowed halls of the United States Congress as the country's 47th president, Donald Trump didn't take long to lay out his particular vision for a second term in office.
Members of the United States Congress, thank you very much. And to my fellow citizens, America is back. We have accomplished more in 43 days than most administrations accomplished in 4 years or 8 years, and we are just getting started.
In a speech that lasted close to 2 hours, Donald Trump, while putting forward his plans for the future, also used the opportunity to blame the Biden administration for the state of the economy.
As you know, we inherited from the last administration an economic catastrophe and an inflation nightmare.
And for his legal woes.
We've ended weaponized government where, as an example, a sitting president is allowed to viciously prosecute his political opponent, like me. How did that work out? Not too good. Not too good.
Invoking a number of symbolic actions he has taken, including renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, he reinstated his desire to take control of the Panama Canal and Greenland.
And I also have a message tonight for the incredible people of Greenland. We strongly support your right to determine your own future, but we need it really for international world security. And I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it.
His audience divided, with the Democrats sitting silent with placards, while the Republicans cheering every word. But dissent was not far off, with some Democrats ejected from the House for their more vocal protest. Addressing the issue of the recent firing of more than 100,000 federal workers and cuts to billions of dollars in foreign aid, Mr. Trump announced the days of unelected bureaucrats were over, even as he introduced Elon Musk as the new unelected head of his new Department of Government Efficiency.
Doge, perhaps you've heard of it, perhaps, which is headed by Elon Musk, who is in the gallery tonight.
The issue of tariffs that has in recent days kicked off a trade war between the United States on the one hand and Mexico, Canada and China on the other was also given the Trump treatment.
April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs kick in, and whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them. That's reciprocal, back and forth. Whatever they tax us, we will tax them.
And some movement too on the foreign policy front, with news from Kyiv.
Earlier today, I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians, he said. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. Simultaneously, we've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful?
His audience, while welcoming the sentiment, divided over how to get there. Edmund Roy, SBS World News.
Ukraine's mineral extraction agreement with the US appears to be back on after Volodymyr Zelensky moved to mend fences with Donald Trump, saying their fiery White House encounter was regrettable. European leaders had criticised President Trump's decision to
hopefully work together with all parties to help implement this plan. The plan is important, but the execution is important as well.
What role, if any, Hamas will play going forward wasn't made clear. The militant group welcoming the blueprint, saying they agreed with plans to rebuild Palestinian national institutions to express the aspirations of our people for freedom and independence. And they also support plans to hold legislative and presidential elections as soon as possible. Israel's foreign ministry slamming the latest proposal, saying Palestinians are being used as pawns against Israel, condemning them to eternal refugee status, and urging responsible states to create a future of stability and security in the region. The UN Secretary-General underscoring the importance of the future leadership in Gaza.
We recognise that reconstruction requires governance and security arrangements that can help guarantee a brighter, more stable future for Palestinians and Israelis alike.
Many wealthy Gulf states have expressed their willingness to contribute to the massive bill needed for reconstruction. But the fragile ceasefire could make countries think twice before spending billions of dollars without a lasting peace deal. In Gaza, 29 children have been evacuated to nearby Jordan for medical care. The first of 2,000 sick children Israel has allowed out of the besieged strip, some having to leave loved ones behind. Gloria Kleisch, SBS World News.
Coming up, could the threat of Cyclone Alfred be potentially complicating the timing of an election announcement? Also, thousands of people forced from their homes as floods swamp Indonesia's capital. And a teenager arrested, charged over an alleged online threat made towards a Sydney mosque. More than 4 million people in southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales are being urged to finalise their preparations ahead of the arrival of tropical cyclone Alfred. The system is expected to make landfall as a Category 2 cyclone between Maroochydore and Coolangatta in the early hours of Friday morning. The warning zone stretches from Double Island Point in Queensland down to Grafton in New South Wales. Now that takes in Brisbane, the Gold Coast, the Sunshine Coast, Byron Bay and Ballina, a distance of about 450 kilometres. Destructive wind gusts of up to 155 kilometres per hour could develop south of the track as far down as Cape Byron as Alfred approaches and crosses the coast. Coastal and inland communities are also being warned of damaging winds of 120 kilometres per hour in a wider area between Double Island Point and Grafton. Heavy rain is also forecast, with daily totals of 200 to 400 millimetres possible, with some areas potentially receiving a total of over 800 millimetres.
Lismore in northern New South Wales still bears the scars of one of the country's worst flooding disasters. Nearly 3 years ago to the day, the damage still evident. The trauma from the 2022 flood still felt deeply by its people as they make preparations for Cyclone Alfred.
I think there's a concern that that will happen again, so therefore everyone's just taking precautions so that it doesn't. It always is going to play in your mind for, when it comes to these kind of weather situations.
Most businesses spent the day shutting up shop, moving stock out of the way and sandbagging windows.
Getting everything out and packing up, leaving, taking off, getting out of here.
Aidan Ricketts was part of the so-called Tinny Army, a flotilla of locals who assisted in flood rescues.
It went over the top of the top part of the veranda up there and got us inside. It was as high as our necks.
He's preparing the same boat again to assist his community, but not until the storm passes.
I'm going to take the boat and the trailer up onto dry land, wait for the major cyclone to go past, and then I'll come back into the water once the winds die down a little bit and it's safe to start moving around a bit.
Also preparing his family for the essentials they may need, including a generator, fuel and medicine.
That was all the problem last time. We lost all of that. We had no ID, no medicines, nothing.
Lismore's mayor says just like Queenslanders north of the border, people here have been hoping for the best but bracing for the worst.
Nervous wrecks, to be honest with you. It's really sad and it's really unfair that this is happening again to our city.
Torrential rain is expected to be dumped on parts of northern New South Wales and southern Queensland, leading to life-threatening flash flooding and river levels rising.
Yeah, we're expecting over the next 3 days anywhere between 300 to 400 millimetres of rain. One of the concerns is if the cyclone, once it reaches landfall, it may stall, and if that's the case, that would severely increase the rainfall to around 600 to 700 millimetres of rain.
The Red Cross is standing by to offer mental health first aid.
Our community has a high level of anxiety because of the memory of 3 years ago.
Federal support is also standing by to assist communities in both states.
I said yesterday that we'd put the ADF on standby. We've now received a formal request and the ADF is now engaged.
Vulnerable populations a top priority for evacuation efforts.
We've had a particular focus on nursing homes, aged care, health services, those sleeping rough, and we're doing all we can to make sure that we get those people out of harm's way as quickly as we can.
Those in affected areas told they should now have their plans in place to either leave or hunker down.
Well, our reporter Alex Jones joins us now from Lismore in northern New South Wales. Good evening, Alex. This cyclone threat is bringing densely populated areas on the coast to a standstill. What's the latest there?
Good evening, Janice. Well, the Bureau of Meteorology late this afternoon confirmed that the far western edge of Tropical Cyclone Alfred is now beginning to impact communities mostly on the northern New South Wales coast. That's between Coolangatta, which is in Queensland, but right on the edge of the New South Wales border, down to Ballina, which is not far from where we are now in Lismore. You might be able to hear the rain picking up a little around us. Now, the initial impacts of the cyclone are, of course, damaging winds and the storm surge, but the flooding is supposed to be one of the major concerns. The Wilsons River behind us here in Lismore is one of many rivers across the region that is expected to rise. Further north in Queensland, Brisbane, the Gold Coast up to Bundaberg are all expected to be impacted, and they have been preparing today as well. Schools have been closed across all impacted areas. Public transport has now been stopped and flights cancelled. And of course, evacuation centres are all now open for those people who feel that they can't shelter in place at home, or for any visitors to the area. Janice?
Thank you so much. That is our reporter Alex Jones updating us from Lismore in northern New South Wales. Well, for more on Cyclone Alfred, I've been speaking with Dr Tom Mortlock, Head of Climate Analytics, Asia Pacific at Aon and Adjunct Fellow from the Climate Change Research Centre at the University of New South Wales. Tom Mortlock, thanks so much for joining us tonight on SBS. Cyclone Alfred is being described as rare and hazardous. Why is that, and just how unusual is it for a cyclone to track this far south?
Well, it certainly is unusual. We haven't had a cyclone to cross the coast in southeast Queensland for the past 50 years. In fact, the last one was TC Wanda in 1974. We don't normally get cyclones this far south, typically because we don't often get the sea surface temperatures warm enough to sustain tropical cyclones tracking much out of the tropics, and that's why we often see them more in northern Queensland and the northwest WA. This will certainly be a test for Queenslanders in and around Brisbane who wouldn't have really experienced one of these in their lifetimes.
Tell us a bit more about the impact of those warmer ocean temperatures. How does that increase the chance of more cyclones making landfall here in Australia?
Yeah, well, the Coral Sea and the Tasman Sea off eastern Australia has actually been warming consistently over the past several decades. We know that since the 1970s, over 90% of the Earth's heat content has been absorbed by the oceans. And so if we're looking for a signature of climate change, then the oceans is probably the first area that we should be looking at. Currently, and very unusually, we actually have a ton of warm sea surface temperatures extending all the way down to Sydney on the order of 26 to 27 degrees. Now, cyclones need a threshold of over 26.5 degrees to to sustain enough energy. And so that's probably partially the reason why we're seeing Alfred track so far south.
Well, Alfred had been slowly tracking parallel to the coast. So what caused it to make such a dramatic U-turn and head towards southeast Queensland?
Yeah, well, the Coral Sea is a really difficult area to predict for any track of any cyclone. What we've seen is that it was drifting further south, and then it hit a ridge of high pressure, and that high pressure is actually the high pressure that's giving nice sunny conditions in Sydney at the moment, and also down in Melbourne. But it prevented the cyclone from moving further south in the Tasman Sea, so it gets up against this hard border, and then it recurves in towards the coast. We're already seeing projections of wave heights in and around the Gold Coast area and as far down as Tweed Heads on the order of 6 to 8 metres. So they're really quite hazardous coastal conditions at the moment.
Yeah, very challenging indeed. Tom Mortlock, thank you so much for your analysis.
Thank you.
Tropical cyclone Alfred has potentially complicated the Prime Minister's election plans. Anthony Albanese has abandoned a trip to the West Coast, anticipating major damage and flooding in the cyclone's East Coast danger zone. The government was also lauding new economic figures showing the fastest quarter of GDP growth in 2 years.
An oncoming storm leaving much of the cabinet awaiting Alfred's approach.
There's no point sugarcoating what the next few days might look like.
The PM attending emergency briefings in Brisbane, axing a state election trip to WA.
Chances are I intend to stay on the East Coast.
Fogging the timeline of the looming federal poll. Speculation an April 12 election would be called as soon as this weekend, rebuked.
I get asked every day for the last year about election timing. I'm focused on governing. That's the sole focus that I have.
Some people will have lost everything. That's the reality of these weather events, and to go to an election at that stage, at that time, I think the Prime Minister would have a tin ear to do that.
I think the discussion about how this affects politics is irrelevant and really crass.
The cost of impending disaster, one of many budget calculations.
There is a lot of global economic uncertainty and also uncertainty just off the coast of Queensland.
But hopeful of cracks in the economic clouds. The latest national accounts showing the economy grew by 0.6% in the December quarter, measuring 1.3% growth year on year.
The Australian economy has turned a corner, that is very clear.
The journey back to where Australian standard of living was when Labor came to power is a long, long one.
With no guarantee of a pre-election budget, the coalition readying its economic sell ahead of the campaign. Today vowing to cut financial red tape, but also suggesting one of its cost of living proposals is for the chop. Last month threatening to break up insurers slugging customers with sky-high premiums.
In the insurance market, we will intervene to make sure that consumers get a fair go.
Asked today about the big stick.
So we've said we'll keep it confined to
supermarkets
and hardware. Yeah.
Not insurers?
No,
okay.
We've been clear on that.
The Greens calling for a new price watchdog.
Get the supermarkets under control and make price gouging illegal.
A supermarket sweep with extra weight in a potentially hung parliament. Naveen Razik, SBS World News.
China has announced a target of 5% GDP growth for 2025. That's despite a slowdown in the domestic economy and escalating trade tensions with the United States. The figure is in line with analyst forecasts, and it was announced before thousands of ruling party members gathered for the highly choreographed annual National People's Congress.
The leaders of China's ruling Communist Party gather in the Great Hall of the People for a day of landmark speeches with global ramifications. Premier Li Qiang delivering the government's work report, including key economic and employment targets for this year.
今年发展主要预期目标是国内生产总值增长5%左右。 城镇调查失业率5.5%左右，城镇新增就业1200万人以上，居民消费价格涨幅2%左右，居民收入增长和经济增长同步，国际收支保持基本平衡。
China's National People's Congress is meeting this week amid geopolitical tensions and its own economic challenges. China is facing weak consumer spending and a struggling real estate market as Washington doubled tariffs from 10 to 20% on all goods imported from China. Beijing retaliating with 10 to 15% tariffs on certain agricultural imports from the United States, but saying it also wants to talk.
因为你从历史上来看，什么关税战也好，贸易战也好，开始它是以这个损人开始，它最后都是害己告终。
It comes as Taiwan announced increased defence spending. No figure was given, but the announcement came with a call for Washington to stay engaged in Asia.
从整个台湾的这个地缘战略的位置上来看，还有整个从美国它的所需要面对的军事安全的层面来看，我不认为美国可以。 就是说 can afford 去失去印太。
In its work report, China announced that it would increase military spending by 7.2% this year to around $400 billion. Aaron Fernandez, SBS World News.
Torrential rain in Indonesia has triggered flash flooding and landslides, with at least one person killed, according to local media. Parts of the capital, Jakarta, and the West Java region were most impacted by the deluge, which has submerged more than 1,000 homes since Monday.
Already known as the world's fastest sinking city, parts of Jakarta have this week become a labyrinth of rivers and canals. In the satellite city of Bekasi, east of the capital, this shopping mall was quickly inundated, sending shoppers scrambling for higher ground. Entire neighbourhoods in this metropolitan area of around 30 million people submerged. Rescue crews navigating areas where flood levels reached as high as 4 metres, working into the night to evacuate people from their homes. For a region regularly hit by floods, many here were still caught off guard.
Yang ini banjirnya cepat sih Pak, cuman apa ya, jadi nggak bisa barang-barang itu nggak bisa ada yang diselamatin. Kayak warung ini kan roboh, terus yang di rumah juga apa habis semua gitu. Turun Pak, turun!
These scenes drawing comparisons to the 2020 flood disaster, which killed at least 60 people. The National Disaster Agency is now reportedly conducting weather modification operations, dispersing sodium into the atmosphere to trigger rainfall at sea before it reaches land. But for now, the Greater Jakarta region, the centre of business and commerce across the vast archipelago, is at a standstill.
Saya tadi mau kerja tuh, jam 8:30, air udah naik, udah gede. Kalau di 9 pagi. Ya, kalau di dalam ruangan begini.
Residents evacuated from the worst hit parts of the city are now being housed in schools and mosques. With more challenges ahead, the country's weather agency warning heavy rain will persist in the capital until early next week. Tais Okuzi, SBS World News.
A 16-year-old from Western Australia has been charged over an alleged online threat made towards a Sydney mosque. The comments, directed at the Australian Islamic House Mosque, located in the city's southwest, have been widely condemned. The teenager was arrested late on Tuesday evening.
At this newly opened mosque in southwest Sydney, worshippers gather for afternoon prayer. Police have been carrying out additional patrols at the Australian Islamic House Masjid since yesterday afternoon, as authorities investigated an alleged online threat posted as a comment on the mosque's Instagram account. "I'm about to Christchurch 2.0 this joint," it read. The comment referencing the 2019 Christchurch mosque attacks when a gunman shot and killed 51 people.
I'm saying it's very worrying in regards to what's happening and the threats that we've received for the mosque, especially when it's newly opened. Islamophobic anti-Semitism, racism, right? This is something is zero tolerance should be in our country, right? That's something that should not be happening.
We won't tolerate it or stand for it. No matter where hate is directed to any member of our community, you've got a right to feel protected and safe in New South Wales.
An attack on one faith is an attack on all faiths. And people need to sit here and say, well, you know, and draw the line.
The special envoy to combat Islamophobia condemning the alleged threat, saying it should not take a replay of the Christchurch massacre in Australia to awaken people to the present threat of Islamophobia. The New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies calling it appalling. No Australian should have to fear for their safety when attending their place of worship. The online threat comes during the first week of Ramadan. Police say there's no ongoing threat to the community, but some say they're still concerned.
بس يصير في شيء بيتعلق بالجالية الإسلامية بتلاقي مروا عليها مرور الكرام يوم يومين انتهت العملية ونسيوها.
We take every threat seriously, and the fact that we had this matter reported to us at midday and a young person was arrested 8 hours later shows that we all take it seriously.
The 16-year-old has been bailed and will appear before the Bunbury Children's Court on April the 4th. Hannah Kwon, SBS World News.
A second nurse has been charged over an anti-Semitic video posted online allegedly threatening Israeli patients. Ahmed Rashid Nadir was arrested by New South Wales Police yesterday after detectives investigating a video with his co-worker allegedly broadcast from Bankstown Hospital. Police say the 27-year-old was charged with using a carriage service to menace, harass or cause offence and being in possession of a prohibited drug. He was granted conditional bail to appeal in court later this month. His fellow nurse, Sarah Abu Lebdeh, was also charged last month. Well, today's GDP report showed a measure of Australian living standards has risen for the first time in almost 2 years. SBS Finance Editor Ricardo Gonçalves joins us with the details. So, Ricardo, what's behind this?
Well, Janice, GDP per capita is the measure. That's the economic output per person. And while it was negative for 7 consecutive quarters amid strong population growth, in the 3 months to December, it expanded by 0.1%, ending what some called a GDP per capita recession. That's 2 or more consecutive quarters of negative growth. It's a small margin, and while there are spots of weakness, it may signal a turning point for the economy.
At least it's saying that the economy is probably past the worst, and in that sort of environment, you would hope that, you know, we're going to get our soft landing.
Meaning a slowing economy with a period of high interest rates to cool inflation without a surge in unemployment. NAB continues to expect a May interest rate cut from the Reserve Bank as a result. And it comes as RBA Deputy Governor Andrew Hauser warned that confidence Australia will be immune to any tariff fallout may be waning, with ambiguity from the US President influencing company investment decisions.
They may choose to just batten down the hatches, postponing planned spending, particularly on long-term investment, until things become clearer. This sort of watchful waiting is pretty sensible individually, but for an economy it can be bad news.
Mr Hauser added that the RBA is keeping a close eye on the inflationary implications of the global trade tensions. And those inflationary concerns also hit the US share market overnight as investors reacted to the activation of various US import tariffs. The S&P 500 down another 1.2% to be 3% lower this week. It also means it's now below when the US President Donald Trump won the election on November 5 last year.
The Federal Reserve is really stuck right now between a rock and a hard place because we see continued signs of sticky inflation. And there's the additional concern that these tariffs that have just been imposed now, should they stay in place for too long, could be inflationary. That would lead the Federal Reserve to want to keep rates higher for longer.
The US Fed meets next to discuss interest rates on March 18. To the Australian share market now, which fell to its lowest point so far this year. The ASX 200 down 0.7%. Woolies and Coles led the declines, however they traded ex-dividend. Energy stocks also tumbled, and that's as the oil price hit its lowest so far this year. Elsewhere, insurer IAG rose as it reassured shareholders it was financially prepared from any Cyclone Alfred potential claims. The banks fell, iron ore miners rose a little on hopes Chinese stimulus will boost demand, while Qantas declined. Its rival Virgin Australia has appointed Chief Commercial Officer Dave Emerson as its new CEO after a global search. He'll replace Jane Hurd-Licker following 5 years in the role.
We'll see if Dave Emerson, who's a long-time Bain consultant based in the US, will energise Australian institutional investors who I think need to see a bit more clarity around the financials and earnings stability, as well as just broader market conditions to support an IPO in the current market climate.
And in currencies, the Australian dollar is higher against a greenback, buying 62.5 US cents, and is firmer against most of the other major global currencies, including New Zealand, where the head of its central bank, Adrian Orr, resigned after 7 years. And is demand for electric vehicles coming off the boil? The Federal Chamber of Automotive Industry says all up, just under 95,000 new vehicles were sold in February. That's down almost 10% amid cost of living pressures. But total battery electric vehicle sales only formed 5.9% of the market, compared with 9.6% on the same time a year ago. Now, these figures don't include Polestar or Tesla, but yesterday the Electric Vehicle Council said Tesla sales were down 71% on the same time last year. The Chamber says there's been an influx of new EV models despite a fall in consumer demand. Sales of some plug-in hybrid vehicles, though, Janice, did rise.
Thank you so much for the update, Ricardo. Well, coming up, Steve Smith plays his final match of one-day cricket. Plus... Australian cricket captain Steve Smith has confirmed his retirement from one-day cricket after he starred in the Champions Trophy semi-final defeat to India. The two-time World Cup winner top scored in Australia's total of 264. Virat Kohli steered India to a 4-wicket win with his knock of 84. India will now play a 5th straight match in Dubai with South Africa or New Zealand, their opponent in Sunday's final.
India's refusal to play matches in Pakistan due to security concerns has meant Dubai has been its temporary home for the duration of the tournament. After winning the toss, Steve Smith's decision to bat was under scrutiny early when surprise opener Cooper Connolly was out for a 9-ball duck. Travis Head went for 39 and regular wickets became a feature, restricting Australia's chances of building momentum. Steve Smith, though, was up for the fight. For 6. When he departed for 73, it was down to Alex Carey to help propel Australia towards the highest total scored in Dubai all-tournament for India to chase.
Playing the field well here, Carey.
In reply, India lost Shubman Gill and captain Rohit Sharma with just 43 on the board. But Virat Kohli dug in his skillful heels, and once that happened, Australia knew it was going to be tough. One of the best chasers in the game, he paced his innings with precision. When Kohli became Adam Zampa's second wicket, it was left to KL Rahul to finish off the run chase.
Down the track, finish it off with a 6.
I thought we probably could have put a few more on. We lost a couple of wickets at crucial times, and if we got 280 plus, things could have been different.
For Kohli, not getting to 3 figures wasn't an issue.
That's what I've done all my career, for me, those things don't matter anymore. For me, it's just about stepping up and hopefully doing the job for the team.
2 former tournament winners in New Zealand and South Africa will battle tonight in Lahore for the right to board the plane to Dubai for Sunday's final. John Baldock, SBS World News.
Arsenal has one foot in the UEFA Champions League quarter-finals after a record-breaking knockout stage victory over PSV Eindhoven. The Gunners scored a stunning 7-1 victory in the first leg. Fellow Premier League side Aston Villa also won away from home, while holders Real Madrid will take a 2-1 advantage over crosstown rivals Atletico in next Thursday's return leg.
It's very significant, but
It's just, to put yourself in a position, in a really strong position to go through to the next round. And that's it, that's the reality.
Coming up, the weather details and... Inspired by wide open spaces, the Swiss Ecuadorian brothers bringing their laid-back sounds to our shores. To the weather forecast now, and the latest on Tropical Cyclone Alfred. We can see the Category 2 system on our map tonight. The western edge is beginning to reach the coast between Coolangatta and in southeast Queensland and Ballina in northern New South Wales. The system is expected to make landfall in the early hours of Friday morning between Maroochydore and Coolangatta. To the major centres now, we'll be seeing more cyclone impacts in Brisbane. There will be showers in Sydney, partly cloudy skies for Canberra, Melbourne and Hobart. Those clouds to clear in Adelaide. A sunny day ahead for Perth, and in Darwin, it's heading for a shower or two and a top of 35 degrees. Let's see what's happening further afield now. Thunderstorms on the way for Nadi, a cloudy day in Noumea and clear skies in Auckland. In Southeast Asia now, thunderstorms for most of the region, including Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur and Jakarta. Let's head further north now. Overcast skies for Beijing, a fine one for Seoul, some rain ahead for Taipei and Hong Kong. Let's head west now. A few showers on the way for Jerusalem, clear and sunny in Tehran and foggy in New Delhi. To Europe now, a cloudy day ahead for Stockholm, rain to hit Moscow and London, partly cloudy in Kiev, clear skies in Paris and Budapest. To Africa now, cloudy and grey in Algiers, some rain ahead for Cairo and Casablanca, thunder to roar through Lagos and Johannesburg. In South America now, cloudy in Caracas and Panama City, rain in Bogota, cloudy skies in Buenos Aires. And for North America, snowfall in Toronto, partly cloudy skies for New York and Washington DC, and rain in Los Angeles. Well, Swiss-Ecuadorian guitar duo Hermanos Gutierrez have garnered a huge following thanks to their otherworldly musical landscapes. The brothers are performing their latest album, Sonido Cosmico, for Australian audiences as they tour the country for the first time. And SBS sat down with them in between sold-out shows.
They cite the desert as one of their main musical inspirations. Instrumental guitar duo Hermanos Gutierrez create dreamy, laid-back sounds, reminiscent of wide-open spaces.
I think it's the nothingness, and it's an essence that it's very hard to capture at the same moment. You're there, but you can feel it. There's like some sort of energy in the desert.
Evocative melodies that stir feelings of longing. The brothers believe this resonates with local audiences.
That's how I see Australian people there. There's some sort of heavier, deeper connection to nature. And I feel like we have this element of nature in our music.
They're also moved by spaghetti Western film scores. Like the 60s classic, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. And vintage Latin American rhythms are a natural fit for the siblings, whose mother is from Ecuador.
Our grandfather, Luis Alfredo Gutierrez, he was like a big influence because he showed us, in particularly one musician, Julio Jaramillo. He's from the 40s, 50s, and he had this one song, Nuestro Juramento. That was like the first time that I discovered like, wow, you can like feel something through music.
The brothers forging a deeper connection to their Latin roots, despite growing up half a world away in Switzerland with a Swiss father.
We always appreciated the differences of both cultures. We're not trying to come up with a concept of like putting some desert and Latin songs together. Like it feels like us.
But they say the Swiss influence is there too.
Growing up in Switzerland, we're very punctual. I'm happy that it's 50-50. It's not just, I think it would be different if we would be just from Ecuador. We wouldn't be here, I guess, right?
Probably, I don't know.
I don't think so.
We're never gonna know.
I don't think so.
Rochelle Harrison-Pless, SBS World News.
Great band. Well, let's recap our top stories now. More than 4 million people in southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales are being urged to finalise their preparations ahead of the arrival of tropical cyclone Alfred early Friday morning. US President Donald Trump has addressed a joint session of Congress, laying out his vision for his second term. He claimed the war in Ukraine would end soon and described his rationale behind the sweeping tariffs against the world. Well, that is the world this Wednesday. If you missed any of tonight's bulletin, you can always catch up on SBS On Demand. Claudia Farhart will be back with our next bulletin. That's just after 10:35 tonight. Till then, from the World News team, good night.